Join us as we explore the hidden rooms, the secret passageways, and every twist and turn in this new standalone Clank game, Clank Catacombs. Welcome back to Talking Cardboard. As always, I'm Jerch, John is to my right, Corey's to my left. If you enjoy the content of any of our videos, click the like button, subscribe, leave a comment. We love interacting with the community. On this episode, we're going to be talking about this standalone kind of offshoot to Clank or Clank in Space or Clank Legacy called Clank Catacombs. Corey, where did you hear about this game? How hot is it? How new is it? And why should we care?
Brand new, just got released at the end of 2022. If not, some people are just getting their hands on it now in early 2023. It's an extremely hot game for good reason. Clank has been a mainstay title in people's collections now for many, many years.
Including ours.
Including ours, yes. It's by designer Paul Dennen, publisher Direwolf Games, and they've come out with not only Clank, but some of our other favorite games too, so we were definitely excited about this one, including Dune Imperium and other games of that sort. So yeah, we were extremely excited to try this game out, give it some plays, and that's exactly what we did.
Now, John, this game, even though it's called Clank, is not an expansion to the regular Clank or Clank in Space. How does this game differ from the regular games that we know of Clank?
Yeah, so just a prelude in case you've never played Clank before in general. The objective of the game is to start diving into this dungeon, or in this case a catacomb, grab an artifact, and then race out of the catacomb or wherever, what Clank game you're playing, and survive to get the most points. This game differs slightly, whereas it doesn't have a set board like the other games do. And granted, the Clank in Space had some modules that changed that gave it some variability. But this one is actually kind of a tile placement game added into all the mix of older mechanics, where as you're exploring the catacombs, you're drawing tiles from a stack and adding them and rotating them based on how they line up with the movement tracks that are on each of the tiles. There are some other minor adjustments as well with some of the locations you can end up on the board, where you have to spend these lock picks to either free prisoners that give you bonus points or instant rewards. You can actually lock pick and get tomes, which are the 7-point cards. And then I believe the last thing is that in order to get major secrets, which used to just be a space on the board, again, this is a chest that you're lock picking to get your major secrets. So they've really added this lock picking mechanic to make it a little more difficult to get through the catacombs, 1, and then 2, to unlock additional big time rewards, which I think is really cool.
Does this feel like the same game, just slightly rebranded, or does this feel like a different game, John?
I think at its core, the mechanics are very similar, and they've just kind of built upon what was there. Like the deck building, I would say, not much different what the other Clank games do. There's combos, there's, you're still using the skill and attack and the movement points as previous games. So really, it's just kind of a unique twist on what formula they already had.
I guess to rephrase this better, if we're talking the different types of Pandemic, all those are pretty much the same game. Even the World of Warcraft one, that one is probably the most off the beaten path version of that. But at least when I've been playing this, I feel like this is a much different game. It's got the same artwork, the same mechanics, so it's familiar. But the fact that you don't know where you're going, you have a certain breadth of rooms you're exploring before you start to get rooms that might have the different artifacts in it, and there's so much variability. It is such different game that I could play this and then play the regular Clank or Clank in Space and have two very different game experiences where I wouldn't feel fatigued playing the same game twice in a row. Corey, what do you think?
Yeah, I do agree with John saying that it does kind of feel, kind of disagree with you and agree with John a little bit, where I do feel like it's 90% the same game as before, but I think that main difference, like you had brought up, with the shifting tiles or the exploration, not knowing what you're getting into, the variation mainly with the tiles is what differs, or makes the game different so much. And I think that big change to the game is what makes it feel so different. But behind the scene, or behind the curtains a little bit, I feel like 90% of the game does feel familiar or similar, but that big change does definitely make it feel different as well.
In a good way, neutral way, or bad way? What do you think?
For me personally, I think getting into the pros a little bit, I think it's a good thing. I think it's definitely a shift. It adds some variability to the gameplay, which I really like and appreciate in all games, especially an older title like this one. I definitely like when they add enough twists and turns to the game to make it not feel samey. And even though I say it's 90% the same game, to me, it does feel almost 100% different. It's kind of an oxymoron in that sense, where it's a big enough change to make it feel that much different. It adds a little bit more luck and swinginess to it, but also it does add to more of that feeling of rewards the more you explore. So it makes you want to explore the catacombs and not just sit back, take what you can get, and run out of the catacombs. It actually does make you feel like when you're going deeper down into the dungeon, per se, it feels like it's making you want to explore more for that or with that mechanism. So.
Well, and it's a lot of exploration. Like in the regular Clank games, it was a lot of north-south.
Right.
And you know where you could go, and then
Right.
you're going to try to figure out to get there. Yeah. And you oftentimes in the original Clank, you want to be going different paths and trying to maximize your directions. But here it seems like you want to stick closer to people because then you have an idea some of the tiles that are coming up that you could go into, and you don't want to go off in your own direction. I know in the games that we've been playing, the one person that goes off in a vastly different direction is the one that usually ends up in trouble.
Yeah.
And it's like that's a really cool part because if you think all of the motifs or tropes of going through catacombs or like down in basements and stuff like that, you don't want to get too far from other people. You're going to get off on your own and in trouble. John, what do you think about that aspect?
And that was going to be one of my pros, is I think the theme of the tile placement really lends itself to the title of Catacombs.
Yeah.
Like you said, it feels like you're going into the unknown. You don't know what's down there. You're drawing these skeleton minions that you're fighting. That's really cool and thematic. The catacombs kind of have these unique twists where some of the cards make you shift or rotate tiles.
Yep.
And that, like, you wouldn't think that's a big deal. Like, oh, this needs to be rotated 180 degrees. You're still going left, right. But you could now be pointed at a crystal cavern or,
Or
a path.
Yep.
Yeah, a one way, or a path where now you need to defeat 2 minions to get through it or something like that. So they've added a lot of, I think, themey things that really fit the catacomb description.
Yeah.
And I really like that. And I would 100% agree with you that, yes, the person that goes off on their own seems to have a tough time because this does introduce that random element where if the tiles you're exploring don't have an artifact on them, well, now all the artifacts might be on the top side of the board from the other players, and you're stuck on the bottom of the board. There are mitigations to that with these portals and whatnot, but again, that's all luck of the tile draw where those end up.
And I think the game that is most closely akin to this in terms of tile placement is Betrayal at House on the Hill.
Yep.
But the difference is in that game when you're playing a tile is that is a single solitary room where you've got the entrance and exits. But here you're connecting to the different tiles that are around.
Yep.
So you don't know exactly what you're walking into even because you could be leaving a room where you had to fight an enemy. And then the path that you're connecting it to, you have to end up fighting another room or playing another footpath where you couldn't even go that direction anymore.
Right.
It's very, very clever and it's unpredictable, but it's not random.
Yep.
You know, like, because when you're playing the tiles, you can orient it the way that will benefit you and try to figure it out. So that's not a detractor so much. I know some of the people we've played with may have thought that it was a little too random. It didn't bother me at all. I liked the exploration of this, and I think it takes the original Clank up to another level because you have an idea of what the game brings, but you don't know a choreographed path through everything to try to get back. There's a lot of meandering and things that change because then you have to figure out your path to get back, and it's not easy getting back. And it's really fun that way.
Yeah, I was just going to say, too, it feels a little bit, just a titch less strategic because it's not a static board. You can't formulate your strategy around a static space and know exactly what you're diving into each and every gameplay. This felt more arcadey to me. Like you're going to go in, you're going to just see what happens and try to push your luck and get back out when you essentially when you want to or when the most opportune moment is to. It just felt more like an arcade game to me. Not saying that's bad. I think that was great. I think that's great. And, spoilers, this might be one of my more favorite titles of Clank, but one of the other pros I was going to mention is that it really felt like the designers of this game were doing themselves a service by pulling other aspects of other versions of Clank and putting it into one game where, like, the ghost cubes, that was pulled from, I think, the Legacy.
Yep.
Where, if a ghost is pulled out of the bag, everybody gets 1 damage. It's just a great addition. The lock picks, I think there were some other locked paths in other games.
Okay.
But once you unlock a path in this game, it stays unlocked for the other players. So it's very thematic. You're unlocking treasures. Some of the other cards are doing different things also. So it's not just a direct copy and paste.
Well, you're freeing prisoners too, and sometimes those are good. Like, there's a lot of things that are added into this game. A lot of the cards are comboing off each other too. Like, that's really cool. There's a lot of extra depth to this where it feels like it's kind of, what is it, a roguelike game?
Yeah,
if you're talking
exactly.
like kind of a skirmish, that you're exploring different things and you know, you're trying to prepare yourself to make that return journey, but it's not necessarily, I wouldn't say that this is more like luck or random, but it's less strategic. Because you can't choreograph your step-by-step in and out.
If I had to describe it, it would be this game, unlike other Clank games, is more reactive versus proactive.
Yes.
Yeah.
And honestly, I really like that.
Yeah.
I like that exploration. It just takes the game, and like we were saying, this game, the mechanics, the behind the scenes are good, but the way it plays, that reactive nature of it, just completely turns it on its head, and it's very unique and fun.
Well, and speaking of turning things on its head too, I know in the other versions of Clank, it felt like I could kind of formulate that strategy that I was talking about and go down and get an artifact and find my direct path of least resistance out of the caverns. In this game, some of the cards that would pop over, they would arrive and you'd have to rotate the tile 180 degrees or shift it however you would like. And now I'm left in a position where I can't even get back to home base without spending an extra 10 boots to get there. So now what am I going to do? And it just turned everything on its head. You have to be aware of that. And I think after multiple plays, that plays into more of the fact that you do want to stay closer to other people. You really do want to piggyback off of maybe the trail that they have trekked before you to unlock those rooms or paths, or explore for you to see what you're getting into before you get there. Or hey, if you're the one taking the risk and exploring a tile yourself, you might reap the rewards from it because it might be a tile with a really big treasure on it that you can get to before other people. So definitely this is what this version of Clank adds to the lineup.
Well, and I was so much more worried about making Clank in this version because I can't figure out how many turns I've got left.
Right.
Yeah, because you don't know if your path is going to be different, and there's a lot of one-ways here, or there's a lot of paths where they've got extra enemies that you have to fight where I can't quite go back that way, otherwise I'm going to be bloodied and bruised too much. So it's very more cautious but explorative and just so much more fun to try to dive into. And the deck that you're building, you really need to be conscious of how much Clank, because there's a couple of cards in here that are giving you like 3 Clank.
Yeah.
And that's more than I remember in any of the other versions, outside of maybe in the Legacy, not to spoil anything, but so it's a lot more prevalent, and you got to be very careful with that, and there's so much more tension with it too. Corey, we've talked a lot about the great upside of this game, how much we love the original Clank and all of those different expansions and offshoots as well.
Yeah.
Are there any things that didn't quite resonate with you or that you felt kind of missed the mark?
I don't think necessarily for me, but I could think of maybe a couple of cons that others might, it might not work for others. And I think, like we described a little bit earlier, there's a little bit more luck in this game, a little bit more randomness, and it does have more of that arcadey feel. Like, you could stumble upon a tile that does give you that higher point treasure that if somebody else were to have drawn that tile one tile before, you know, the random luck of the shuffle, then they would have gotten to that before you. So there is that little aspect of randomness that could turn some people off. But again, that's kind of the whole jive, the whole brand of this title here. So I just wanted to mention that you do have to be aware of it. It's like John said earlier, it's not as strategic, but more tactical. You have to really turn on your heels, think on your feet, and not as much pre-planning.
And I guess one more kind of, I don't know if it's a con, but just in the times that we've experienced it, the market is a lot less useful and the gold is a lot less prevalent. And I don't know, we would have to actually look at the mechanisms of the original game or the cards or the spaces on the board to see if it really is less prevalent to be getting gold.
Right, or if we just have bidding not hitting that luck of seeing those cards or those tiles.
But in the times that we've played it, the market has been mostly untouched.
Yeah.
And I know it's always powerful to get those health potions, to potentially get those crowns or the items that are giving you just free bonus points. But we haven't really experienced that a whole lot in our games. And, you know, more playtesting, which we're going to do plenty of with this game, will bear out if it actually is harder to get gold, and then if the market items are much more at a premium.
Right.
So now on to our final ratings, and you are in for a treat because we are using a brand new rating system. As a matter of fact, if you click the link below right now, then you're going to see our revamped rating system. It's going to be a 1 to 5, and we go into a lot more depth on what those meanings are because it has been difficult for us to articulate how we feel about a game in other types of systems or just like a percentile rank or things like that. Yep. So we came up with our own 1 to 5 scale, and we're going to test this out live for you here. John, on our 1 to 5 Talking Cardboard scale, what would you rank Clank Catacombs?
So although we've never had any Clank reviews posted on the channel, Clank games have consistently come up in my top 10s. Mm-hmm. So for me, this is a pretty easy 5. This is Clank to the next level. I think it's a version that I like up and above, Clank in Space, Clank. Legacy is kind of a tough one to judge, but this is going to hit a 5. It's an excellent game, I think. Like Corey was saying, easy for me to take somewhere, show people how to play, or just play with other gamers that just still enjoy a game like Clank.
Mm-hmm. And I agree as well. I'm giving this a 5 stars. This is one that I'm glad we have in our collection. Mm-hmm. And I know over the last couple of months, we all were kind of texting each other to see, are you going to buy it? Are you going to buy it? Are you going to buy it? Because we knew we needed to have this game in our collection. And it is a staple. It's one that I've suggested to non-gamers, to my family. I think it's one that could even be brought to the table for that. And people are going to enjoy it. It is one that I'm glad we have in our group, and I'm pretty sure I'll have to borrow it in the not too distant future to make sure I can start sharing this with people in my life. So definitely 5 out of 5 rating for me. Corey, finish this up.
For me, it's a 4 out of 5 stars. Still an excellent game. The only thing kind of keeping it from a 5 to me is it's not really going to be a game that hits maybe my top 20 favorite games of all time. It's not like the upper echelon, but it's still probably one of my favorite, if not my favorite version of Clank. So that is definitely saying a lot. If you don't have Clank already, I would definitely run out and give this one a try or check it out. If you do own one of the other versions of Clank, still check it out. I don't know if it's necessarily a run out and buy unless you're looking to completely swap one for the other, because I think they are similar enough to not really have to have both in your collection. I think one is going to speak to you more than the other type, or the other version is going to speak to you. One or the other. I don't know if you're going to really need both. I guess that's my whole point. Still excellent. Deck building is fun. Deck building feels very prevalent in this version. The whole exploration feels awesome. You don't know what you're getting yourself into. Feels like a little bit more difficult version to get through the catacombs versus any other Clank game. So it definitely deserves a solid 4 out of 5 for me.
Now check me if I'm wrong, gentlemen, but with our ratings there, I think that gets the first Talking Cardboard seal of approval.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Congratulations, Clank Catacombs, because you received at least a 4 rating from all 3 of us. That is going to be our seal of approval. It's a really high standard that we're going to set. We want to make sure that our games are really reaching a level that we all agree on, and this is the first game in 2023 that hits that mark. So from all of us here at Talking Cardboard, if you like Clank, Clank in Space, or Clank Legacy, really go check out Clank Catacombs.